Hello, my name's Andrew Thomas, and ideally you will have already seen the short introduction to the rainbow map, so you know what the main elements of this jargon-free and very simple to use tool are. I'm going to show you in this module how to complete the rainbow map for the first time. I'm going to take you through it step by step. So ideally by the end of this session, you'll have a rainbow map completed for the first time. And then that will be a starting point for you to use it on a regular basis to start to develop that new form of self-awareness, an awareness of your emotions, your thoughts, your sensations and your behaviors, but in a much more focused and separate way, which will open up all sorts of new avenues for you to improve existing resources or develop new ones that will help you reduce the level of discomfort that you're experiencing today, perhaps because of depression, anxiety, maybe fear, or connected with trauma and PTSD-like symptoms. So let's go over and have a look at a rainbow map and we'll get started. So to open a rainbow map, I covered this very briefly on the previous video. Just go to the rainbow mapping website, click on the menu, and you can see download print on the menu there. So if you click on that, you'll see you've got access to three resources there. Again, always free of charge on the rainbow mapping website. You've got the standard rainbow map. Now on the professional side of the website, there are other varieties of rainbow map that are used in different situations. You've got the aid memoir, which you'll hear me read from at times as I take you through the rainbow map, and you can open this up and use it yourself as a cue to help you think of responses to the questions I'm going to ask you as we work through the rainbow map together. And then a one-page summary of the reflective mind and reactive brain-body model. You can open that and have a look if you're interested in it. It's not essential, but that really summarizes what the rainbow map helps you achieve, which is a clearer distinction between your reflective mind, reactive brain, and reactive body. And by doing that, once you start to get that capacity, it enables you to exert more choice in terms of what you say and do in reaction to what's happening within you and around you. And then all of this will lead us on to the next video in this self-help sequence, where I'll help you learn how you can start to develop new resources or modify existing ones that will reduce the discomfort you experience. So let's look at the standard rainbow map, which ideally you've seen before. If you haven't been able to print it out, then you can always draw one for yourself. As you can see there, you don't have to colour it in. As long as you get the rows and the columns right, then it's perfectly usable for this module. Let's get started, shall we? I'd like you to think of, and you can stop this video at any time so you've got time to reflect, and I might suggest you do that occasionally as we go through this. So it's best to work with something from your own life in terms of completing the rainbow map for the first time. And it needs to be something that either currently or in the not too distant past typically would cause you to get either quite angry or quite fearful or quite frightened, or perhaps sad and maybe depressed. But we don't want to work for the first time with anything that would do that to a really powerful extent for you. Better to get a understanding and a handle and an ability to appreciate what the rainbow map does before you step into areas of your life that are causing you maybe really intense discomfort. So if you need to pause the video now, do pause it. But if you can reflect on something and just sort of think about it a little bit, if it's starting to trigger you into really intense discomfort, then pick something else and we'll start working with that. So hopefully you've got something now. Before we start working on it, what's often I do with the rainbow map is to actually get a clearer perspective on what it's like when you are in your okay place. So on the rainbow map, just to remind you, that's in this green band here. So what we're going to do is work on that green band. And first of all, let's just think about what it's like to be you when you're in that comfortable place. You might want to think about what you're doing, what sort of, maybe you're walking a dog or cooking. What are the things you can notice about yourself when you're in that place? I mean, the behaviors here, it's quite a wide definition. So it's really what the outside world could notice about you. But the rainbow map is very much ultimately not about asking people what they notice about you and then putting it on the rainbow map, but it's about what you can notice about yourself. So maybe you notice something about your voice, that it's typically you can notice it being calm and steady when you're in your okay place. So you basically put down what you might be doing and what you can notice about yourself when you're in that okay place. And as you can see, I've started completing the rainbow map on the right-hand side here. There's absolutely no reason why you have to work left to right. You can fill the rainbow map in sort of roughly any order you really want to. The most important thing is you use the rainbow map in a way that best fits what you're trying to achieve and your style. Let's have a look at the emotion column. So what sort of emotions might you be experiencing when you're in your own okay place? Maybe you'll feel happy or loved. So what I'd like you to do now is start to fill your own rainbow map in with what you think reflects your emotions, and then do that as we step through the columns and the rows on the rainbow map. So what about your thoughts? What sort of styles of thinking would reflect what you're experiencing of yourself when you're in your own okay place? So maybe you're open-minded, or perhaps creative, and maybe a typical thought you might have is, let's do that again. So the typical thoughts would sort of have speech marks around them. These are things that your reactive brain would generally generate automatically. You're not having to drive it to do that. It's just spontaneously creating that style of thinking and those typical thoughts when you're in that okay place. And then looking at your sensations. And again, a lot of people don't notice very much, but some people notice maybe steady breathing or relaxed shoulders. But don't worry if as you reflect, if you don't notice anything. And again, I remind you, just stop this video anytime you want if you need a little bit more time just to reflect and write what you think you need to do as we work through the rainbow map. So now I'm going to work through the rainbow map as though you trigger straight up into sort of a fight-flight type of place. So we're going to work with the rainbow map in this style where people trigger straight up, maybe plateau for a while, go further up to a really angry or frustrated place, and then come down into a sort of sadder, more depressed state before finally recovering. That's how I'm going to do it, but not everyone goes like that. There are plenty of people who trigger straight down into sadness and depression before they go up. Other people who maybe are really exhausted can sometimes trigger just a little bit before they sort of collapse down before finally recovering again. And then occasionally there are some people And this is typically connected with something called disassociation, who trigger right up and can get extremely angry and then can calm straight down back into the okay place quite quickly. And I talk about that in other modules. And I'm going to ask you now to think about your triggering up. And this is the first emotions you start to experience as you start to trigger up. And I'm going to go and open up an aid memoir because I'll start to read some cues out to you from it. So let's have a look. So I'm going to be reading from this area on the aid memoir. So can you see here? I feel increasingly angry, frustrated, resentful, overwhelmed. I'm not suggesting these are all the things you're experiencing, but they're sort of like a menu. You can pick from them or add to them or modify them to suit what you actually genuinely experience. So let's go back to the rainbow map and just find out what you experience here. So maybe you're someone, and I'm not suggesting, obviously, I don't know you, haven't met you. Maybe you're right down here, you're angry, or you feel anxious or frightened. And then we would move across. I typically move across the rows. There's absolutely no reason why you can't just move up and down. And do, as I mentioned before, just use it in the way that feels right to you. And then moving across into thoughts. And if we go again into the aid memoir, we're looking at in this yellow transitional area. How do your typical styles of thinking start to change? Maybe they become increasingly pessimistic, critical, suspicious, untrusting, judgmental. You can see the other words listed there. So you can stop the video, read those cues, those ideas, and then write them in your rainbow map. So maybe you become increasingly pessimistic or critical of others, or and then a typical thought might be no one cares. So write as much as you like in these areas that helps you get a picture of what it's like to be you in terms of your thoughts, your emotions. The greater clarity you can get, the greater distinction, the more effective the rainbow map can be for you in your life in terms of helping you start to reduce the intensity and duration of the discomfort you're experiencing. And then moving across to sensations, we'll start to, in a way, do a body scan here. And the aid memoir helps you do that. It starts off looking at your head, your jaw, your mouth and your throat, and offers some thoughts there, moving through your chest, shoulders and chest, your breathing, heart, stomach, muscles, skin and temperature and energy. So you can start writing down what you experience. Now, the other thing about the rainbow map is some people don't notice anything in some of these columns. And it's not uncommon for people not to notice some physical sensations. So don't worry if you can't write anything down here, but it's a useful area of reflection to think about why you don't notice anything here. And as you start to work with the rainbow map, it's very common for people to start to experience sensations in their body, which is typically a sign of healing, that you're starting to reconnect with parts of your brain, reactive brain and reactive body system, which can be very helpful. If you really want to get into the depths of that, then later on in stages 4 and 5 of the self-help approach, you'll start to learn about avoidance theory. Again, it's jargon-free, and that really introduces you into and helps you understand why maybe if you are a person that doesn't notice your sensation, why that came about in your life. And by understanding possibly why it came about, that generates greater resilience, greater understanding of what's going on with you, which opens up a capacity to develop resources that will help you start to reduce the impact of those past experiences and how your system got trained originally. So let's look at sensations. So maybe you experience a dry mouth or a tight throat. Now, for me, if someone puts in dry mouth, I would add to that, where do you notice that first? So maybe it's a dry tongue. Might even go further, if I could spell tongue, a dry tongue. I might even go further to find out where on the tongue it gets dry first. Is it the tip? Is it the top? Is it the bottom? And the more precise you can be, the more useful that awareness is for you. And you'll see why just in a minute. And so then we come across to behaviors. And on the aide memoir, it's worth reading this if you want, but you don't have to. It's basically how things start to change. What sort of behaviors do you start to notice changing as you initially start to trigger into this fight-flight place? Perhaps you start to fidget more, or maybe your voice gets higher and louder. Then maybe it's behaviors that you start to eat faster. Or perhaps you use social media more or differently. So hopefully you're starting to see that you're getting a picture of what it's like to be you as you start to trigger up. Now, this first time around, I would suggest you probably don't go any higher than this. So you don't start to actually record what it's like to be you at the highest levels of your discomfort. It can be useful to become aware of that. But in many ways, with the rainbow map, in order to get the benefits of it, you don't have to do that. This area, these two areas, the yellow band and the blue band, are really very, very useful in terms of helping you start to reduce the intensity and the duration of your discomfort, because these are transitional areas. And in the transitional areas, you've still got the capacity to notice what you're saying and doing. And even more importantly, the capacity to choose to do something different. Instead of being driven by what your thoughts are, which is maybe pushing you to say things that might be very unhelpful to you or others around you, you can actually choose to say or do some things that are different. So these transitional areas are really important. And if you go into some of the later phases, stage 4 and stage 5, again, you'll learn more about why that is. In these transitional areas, you've got the capacity to start healing for the long term, to start to make fundamental, small changes that build on each other gradually, so that after a period of time, you really are reacting to what's happening within you and around you in a different way, in a way that is not so extreme or so harmful to yourself or others as you once used to. So why don't we have a look at what it's like to be you below the line. So if you go into the yellow band or higher, it's very likely that you'll have a period below the green band where you're feeling sad and a bit dejected. So what sort of emotions might you be experiencing in those lower areas? And again, we can have a look at the aide memoir. That might give us some ideas below. So you might feel increasingly rejected, defeated, frightened, maybe vulnerable, defensive or despondent, overwhelmed, lost. I mean, I could read on, but I think you get the idea. Again, write down there what sort of emotions you might be feeling. And then moving on, let's have a look at what your thoughts are. So again, styles of thinking. Let's have a look at what sort of styles of thinking you might be experiencing. So maybe they become more pessimistic, negative, critical of self. Maybe you are critical of others up here, but self-critical down here. So that would be a style of thinking. Maybe you might become more dogmatic or inflexible. or perhaps a bit paranoid. And so a typical thought might be, I'm useless. And so again, this is really highlighting what the rainbow map is trying to achieve, which is helping you, even in your thoughts, distinguish and separate what a style of thinking is and a typical thought is. And by doing that, it gives your reflective mind more handholds, more places to reach hold and grab hold of, so you can notice what's happening to you yourself with greater clarity and more certainty. Because as you can see in this area here, in the okay place, you're going to react to the world in a more open, a more creative, a more constructive way. And as you move away from that, you're going to react to the world in a much more forceful, in a way, pre-programmed way. Because the systems, the training that we had in the earlier parts of our lives and our genetics are there to help us survive, but not in a world of today where most of us aren't subject to actual physical danger. It was developed and evolved for a world where, of 100,000 years ago, where there was real physical danger 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if they had weeks back then. The idea here is to combat that very powerful system that can drive us to behave in ways that aren't helpful to us or others around us. And so moving across, let's look at sensations. So what sort of sensations might you be experiencing as you go down? Maybe your mouth, jaw, throat is slack or loose. Maybe your chest, shoulders are slumped and sagging. Perhaps your breathing changes or your stomach is queasy. So we can write down whatever fits and helps you describe what you experience yourself. Maybe you just feel weak or numb. So I will just try and get that to be spelt correctly. Slumped shoulders, and then moving across onto your behaviors. So again, what sort of behaviors? Maybe you notice you have disrupted sleep. You drink more, maybe. Eat fatty foods, perhaps. Maybe you stop seeing friends. You isolate yourself. This first time round, maybe don't go too low, don't go right to the depths of your experience. Hopefully you've picked an experience from your current day life or something you can remember in the not so distant past, but that didn't involve the real extreme tops or bottoms of the rainbow map. But once you get a hang of it, you can start to use it for that. But I would suggest that if ever you are using the rainbow map and you're starting to feel that it is driving you and causing your sort of discomfort to start to go up in a way that you feel is a little bit worrying for you, I'd suggest you stop using it at that point and just come back to it when you feel calmed down. So now we're going to have a look at the trigger cycle. And here we're going to start again. We're going to do triggering up and then triggering down. Think about how long it takes you to get up into that yellow band. It's probably going to be seconds or minutes. Are you someone then who sort of stays in that sort of moderately triggered area for a period of time? And if it's any more than sort of even an hour or two, that can become quite wearing and sort of generate quite a lot of fatigue and sort of grinding anxiety. Or maybe you're someone into mindfulness and meditation. You're able to calm yourself down for a while, so you might be sawtoothing for a while. But if the source of the irritation or the triggering is still there, maybe you finally are unable to contain it and you trigger up into a higher level of the rainbow map before you finally transition down into a sort of more sad, perhaps depressed place before you recover. As I mentioned before, some people trigger straight down. Quite a lot of people who've experienced childhood abuse can be like this, where they trigger straight down rather than going off, i.e. they shut down and can stay quite low for a long time before they finally recover. So you're going to find really your own style, your own pattern for the triggering, and then try to estimate how long it takes you to get from the green band back to the green band. And as I've mentioned before, that might be different in different situations. And then, importantly, decide what's the first sign of your triggering. It's unlikely to be emotions, because emotions can be quite hard to notice. You just experience them. Whereas it's often clearer to pick an experience from your thoughts, your sensations or behaviors, and in particular, possibly sensations and behaviors. They can become some of the clearest signs that you're starting to trigger into fight, flight or hide, play dead state. So you might want to just pause this video, have a look at your rainbow map, have a look at what you entered in here, and circle something that you think is the clearest first sign that you would notice most reliably when you start to trigger. For this video, it's a dry mouth and a dry tongue. So write that down here. And then following today's video, in the coming days, if you do trigger, see whether that is a reliable sign. And that can become a really, really useful tool to you, because that will help you notice your triggering much earlier than you have been able to before. Because as I said earlier, the sooner you can catch yourself triggering, the sooner you can start to do something about it, so that you don't have to endure the sort of increase in discomfort that you would do as you go higher and higher in the rainbow map, or lower and lower. And the idea here is not to put a lid on it, but as you go on to the next self-help module, is to develop resources that start to help you heal. If all you're doing is just putting a lid on it, like you just notice yourself triggering and then you just clamp down on it without using any real resources to push back and reduce the intensity, then you may find yourself just having slightly more intense triggering experiences. Once you've started to master noticing yourself, it's really important that you go on and look at the next video on resources and healing, so you can start to develop ways to actually help you achieve those outcomes. Hi, so hopefully that has given you some ideas about how you could complete the rainbow map for yourself and start to experience the benefits that are very accessible. And also you can quite quickly experience them once you start using the rainbow map. And I would use it as a sort of a note-taking tool, maybe daily or maybe at set times during the week. But the first goal in the self-help approach is for you to start generating the capacity to notice yourself, to be self-aware in terms of your emotions, your thoughts, your sensations, and your behaviors, and also comment to yourself on what your trigger cycle is. That's really the foundation of the self-help approach. And once you start to develop that expertise and you feel that you're starting to get, okay at it, you don't have to be perfect. There will be times when you just trigger and you're only able to notice what happened to you afterwards. Ultimately, we're looking for you to be able to notice yourself triggering as it's happening, which is what the trigger flag tool is very much there to help you achieve. Once you're there and you've got that self-awareness, that's the time then to go on to the next stage of the self-help approach, which is the resources and healing video. There's nothing to stop you watching that now. It might be quite helpful to give you an idea of where you're going. But until you've developed that self-awareness, as I've mentioned before, that resources and healing will probably be of less use to you than it could be. But as I said, it there's no reason why you shouldn't watch it now, because it will give you an idea of where this self-help approach is headed. And then you can watch it again just to really reinforce the messages that are contained in it. So hopefully this has been a useful video, and you'll look at the upcoming videos in the self-help approach on the Rainbow Mapping website. Thanks a lot for giving me your time today.